When God created the human race, he created the human race to act in history from his vantage point in eternity. It's called in theology the dominion covenant, the agreement that he made with mankind. To understand what the male's role is, juxtaposition the female's role, you have to understand the dominion covenant, because that's key to understanding what you are about individually, what marriage is about, and what purpose is about, all lined up in this one agreement that God made with history through mankind. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, we read, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." 3 words establish the covenant. Let them rule. That means dominion. That's why God breathed into man the breath of life, so that man would have the Spirit of God operating in this physical body, so that he could manage the physical world from the spiritual reality of God. That is the human assignment. That is why God made you, me, and us. So that is the job of the human race. But because God turned it over to man and gave man freedom, he allows us to mess it up if we choose to. Because within the creation process, God granted freedom. That's why he gave Adam the option of choosing. So we have freedom to mess up God's purposes. We also have the freedom to get back in it so that we can get things aligned correctly. So even though that was the mandate, the dominion mandate to rule on God's behalf in history, God did not create man and woman at the same time. It says he created Adam first. And the reason he created Adam first was that he was supposed to be the foundation. He was to be the stabilizing force on which everything else that God made would be built. He created the man first, and he put him in the garden. The garden was the place of God's abiding presence. God says in verse 18, "Then the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." All right, so let's get this straight. Adam is not looking for a woman, because God said it's not good for Adam to be alone. Adam didn't say that. Adam didn't say, "Where's she at?" Before Adam realized he was alone, God determined he was alone and said, "I'm going to get him a helper. A helper suitable for him." Now watch this. God has already given him a job. He's not going to give him a helper until he got a job. So ladies, if you're single, make it known. No finance, no romance, okay? So he gave him a job. He gave him his presence. And then he decided, okay, now I'm going to give you a helper who is suitable because you are alone. Adam, the job I want you to produce is so big, so substantive, so gargantuous that you can't do it all by yourself alone. So I'm going to bring somebody alongside of you who corresponds to you, who's going to enable you to expand your dominion further than you could ever do it on your own. So while a woman does have a priority role in the home, and yes, that is a priority responsibility, it's all tied into a bigger agenda. And the bigger agenda is her gifts and her skills and her calling to expand the rule. So a man who is not maximizing what God has given to the woman has limited what God can do through him because he's not using the help that God provided. That the job of the help is to expand the rule in the context of companionship. The word easier is a very interesting Hebrew word because most of the time it's used in the Old Testament, it's referring to God coming to the aid of somebody. So easier, help, is used of God intervening in human situations to help people through or out of or around circumstances that come in life. So when he says that the woman is a easier kenigdo, she corresponds to him because she's human, but her job is to do what God does, and that is come alongside to help things become what the Creator designed them to be. So you want to maximize the potential of the woman in your life, not denigrate it, but to highlight it, because the issue of aloneness wasn't just companionship, it was fulfilling a dominion mandate. So let's get this straight. I'm sure we have a lot of singles here. So let me explain something. Adam didn't need Eve to become complete. Because we mix up being single and being alone. Those are not the same thing. It's assumed if I'm single, I'm alone. No. If you are single, the word single, if you look it up in Webster's dictionary, means unique or whole. That's what it means. But we have stitched it into being alone. If you are a single, like Adam is right now, and like Eve will be before she's introduced to Adam, you are supposed to be a complete single. Marriage should be a bonus, not a necessity. Okay? You are to be complete. I am saying that happiness is not God's primary goal for marriage. Once you make happiness the primary goal, when you're not happy anymore, you don't want to stay married. Because happiness was the goal. I'm going to show you in a minute. Happiness is the fruit, not the root. The root of the goal was let them rule. And if I could ever get them to rule underneath me, in relationship to me, under the authority of me, properly relating to one another, happy won't be a problem. Because happy will be the result of fulfilling the purpose for the arrangement I set up in the first place. So he's now establishing what they are to be about. They are to be about operating under his rule. So now God brings out all the animals. And he brings them out to see what the man would call them. Adam could only name what God brought him. He couldn't go out naming stuff. It says God brought it and he named what God brought. Dominion is seeing God bring things before you and seeing that is being brought before you by God and you giving it an identity. So it is to exercise whatever you name, you are now responsible for. So if you want to be a man that God can bring things to so that you can lay hold of it, lay claim to it, you should be saying, God, for this week, I'm going to start my day with you. I'm going to bring you in on everything related to my day. I'm going to make time to make you the priority of my day so that you can flow to me so that I can see what you have for me so I can give name to it and ownership of it to increase your dominion in history. And therefore, experiencing kingdom rule. So, Adam is naming all the animals, but for Adam, there was not suitable help. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep, verse 31, to fall upon the man, and he slept. And God took out one of his ribs, closed up the flesh of that place. And then God fashioned to a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought it to the man. So he sees it coming, and he says, she shall be called woman. That's what it says. She shall be called woman. What did he just do? He named her woman. That's a man with a womb. Let me take you back to Genesis chapter 1. We will make man in our own image, in male and female. He made man in his own image. So a woman she was taken from a man, rib of a man, and she was made, she's called woman. She's a man with a womb, because a woman was made to receive. A woman receives the man's name. Adam names her. Any man who has a woman who won't take your name is not the woman you should marry. She was to take his name. Why? Because whatever you name, you're responsible for. Whatever you name, you own. Whatever you name, you govern. The man is to leave his father and mother. Doesn't say anything about the woman leaving her father and mother until the man leaves his father and mother, because he's responsible for setting up a new homestead. So, the Bible calls this relationship, the couple now, a covenant. A covenant is a divinely created bond that does one thing: it covers. A covenant is a mechanism through which God's favor flows. If you are not covenanted, that is, operating under the guidelines and governance of God, if you're not doing that, you're uncovered. And if you're uncovered, that means the intervention, favor, blessing of God is not free to flow. The Bible says in Deuteronomy 29:9, I give you this covenant that you might prosper, that I might be able to do my thing through you. So the reason that the devil wants to make you miserable if you're married is he wants to keep you uncovered. And once he keeps you uncovered, God can't flow. Once he keeps you divided, God won't flow. God says if the husband is mistreating the wife in 1 Peter 3 verse 7, if the husband is mistreating the wife, not recognizing her, appreciating her, diminishing her, physical or emotionally abusing her, tell that man, do not pray. I will not listen to his prayer. That's how important the woman is and how she's treated and valued. And in fact, you should, ladies, accept nothing less than that. Okay? Because your ultimate responsibility is to God. So, Malachi chapter 2, verses 13 to 16, here it is, and this is important for all the singles listening. He says, she is your wife by covenant, but it goes on to say, you are together, watch this, in spirit. Now, here's the way most people get together. They get together by attraction. That's the physical. You see somebody, they look good, she looks good, he looks good, and you're attracted. And that's fine. Man looks on the outward appearance, so that's fine, but that's just phase one. Now we go to phase two. Phase two is soulmate. That means we like each other. In other words, we connect. So you got the physical, you got the the soulmate. We connect. We connect with each other. But Malachi says a whole deeper level. Spirit. Spirit is your joint connection with God. That's spirit. With your joint connection with God under the covering of the covenant. See, the Bible says, 1 Thessalonians 5:23, we're not body, soul, and spirit. We're spirit, soul, and body. The spirit must be put up top because then it can manage the soul and the physical. If you want to see the covenant work, then a man must be relationship driven with God. underneath the ruling of God so that he can get a greater experience of God. Now let's make it clear. Dominion is not domination. Let's show you how all this works together from 1 Corinthians chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 kind of puts the package together for us. It's a very important chapter that often doesn't get looked at intimately. Let me start with verse 7. For a man ought not to have his head covered, since he is the image and glory of God. The word glory means to advertise. Okay? Stay with me here. The man is to advertise God, make God look good. But the woman is the glory of the man. For man does not originate from woman, but woman from man. Remember the rib. For indeed man was not created for the woman's sake, but the woman for the man's sake. Remember, I'm going to make a helper suitable for you. So he made the woman to come alongside the man. Now watch this, ladies. Therefore, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Let me pause. Let me push pause right there. The woman is to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Well, let's talk about the theology of angels. Every Christian has been assigned an angel, Hebrews 1:14 says. So every Christian has an angel who's full-time assigned to your well-being, okay? It's an invisible, angelic being who's assigned to you by name. Their job, angels are like the post office. They deliver the mail. They are the executors of the program of God. So when you go to God and you say, I need you to do this, I want you to do that, one of the ways he does it is by dispatching his message to your assigned angel to act in whatever way God wants to act in light of your prayer. He says, but when a woman is not operating under authority, he calls covering, if you're not operating under the legitimate, not illegitimate, but legitimate authority, if you step from under the umbrella that God has given you, if you're operating in rebellion against your mate illegitimately, then what you just stepped out of was the covering of God, and your angel will not be dispensed to your benefit because you're operating in rebellion. So if you're giving your husband a hard time illegitimately, if you're disrespecting him illegitimately, if you're rebelling against him illegitimately, you are blocking God doing anything for you, and it doesn't matter how much church you go to, because it's operating under God's covenant and under God's covering. So the man is to operate under the covering, the woman is to operate legitimately under the man, under the covering. But he's not finished yet. He goes on and he says in verse 10, however, in the Lord, neither is a woman independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. So he says, while there is a role that you play, it is an interdependent role, not an independent role. You need her, she needs you, you all need God. Okay? For as the woman, verse 12, originates from the man, so also the man has his birth through the woman. So the woman exists because God took Adam's rib. But babies are born, men are born, boys are born because they come out of the womb of the woman. Women have been made, here it is, women have been made to receive. So a woman receives the male sperm. She gets then pregnant. When she gets pregnant because of what she's received, she produces something out of her womb that never existed before because of what she received from the man. What she received from the man produced something brand new inside of her that came from her that is beyond what the man could ever do without her. So what God is saying in physical birth, he's saying through all the dominion covenant. There's some things I will only do if you give her something to receive. But if you give her something to receive, she's going to let that thing grow. And when she produces what she produces out of what you gave her to receive, all y'all going to have more than what you started with. Because I am creating an expansion of my rule in history. And that's why Genesis 1 says, at the end of let them rule, he blessed them. That's where happy come in. That's where happy. Everybody looking for happy without being underneath God's covering properly. Happy, blessed, is the result. It's not where you start. It's the result. And when we get aligned properly under God with each other, then we will begin to see all that God can do. For the woman, verse 12, originates from the man, so also the man gains his birth through the woman, and all things originate from God. You see how the whole package comes together? It is God, the man, the woman, interdependent within their roles, and you see God moving through the scenario in a transformational way. So the question is, how bad do you want it? That means we as men, from starting with me, but to all the men, we have to make a relationship with God our dominant theme underneath his rule. And when that happens, you'll see more of God than you can handle. And others will benefit from it. Today, we're going to talk about the leading candidate of faith in the Bible. If I were to use football language, you would call this guy a beast. Because when it came to faith, he is the creme de la creme. He is the superstar. He is the most valuable faith person. In fact, when the Bible wants to talk about faith, he is a constant illustration of it. Hebrews chapter 4 and the book of Galatians chapter 3 keeps talking about this guy. In fact, this guy is such a beast. He is such an illustration of faith. And his name is Abraham. Abraham is called the father of the faith. In Galatians chapter 3, verses 6 to 9, it says, and when you learn to live by faith, you become one of his children. You become an heir to Abraham, who was the superstar of faith. And if you learn what we go over these next 3 weeks for this one personality and his wife, you will enter into a realm that perhaps will be brand new to you, and to an experience with God that will be fresh, not stale, because you have learned to live like Abraham lived. In Hebrews chapter 11, we read in verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. We're going to learn 3 things about Abraham today and his walk of faith. That if you want to experience God at a whole new level by faith, it will involve a leaving, a living, and a looking. If you want to experience God as you've never experienced him before, as you move by faith, it will involve a leaving, a living, and a looking. Let's start with the leaving. Because verse 8 tells us, by faith, when he was called, he obeyed by going out to a place. Now, this is described for us in Genesis chapter 12, chapter 13, when God told Abraham, I want you to leave your city, your community, your house, and even your people. And I want you to go to a place that I'm not going to tell you about yet. Said he didn't know where he was going. All he knew is God told him to leave, without knowing where God was taking him. Why is God telling him to leave Ur of the Chaldees? Why is God telling him to move away from family and friends and the things he grew up with? Well, to understand that, you have to understand chapter 11, the chapter that precedes God calling him. In chapter 11, the whole world has rebelled against God. A man named Nimrod, an African that you shouldn't be proud of, led the whole world in rebellion against God. The Tower of Babel established the religion of humanism, man-centered religion. It says that they gathered together as one people to build a civilization, and right in the center of the city, they built a tower, that is a ziggurat, that is a worship steeple. And they said, we will build our tower to the heavens. We don't need God. We've got intelligence, brains, reason, science, technology. We can build this thing ourselves. We don't need God. We don't need God to help us. In fact, we're going to build this thing so high, we're going to show God we can get to him. Of course, Genesis 11 says, and when God looked down and saw what men were doing, he came down. So I don't care how high you get, how much money you make, how much notoriety you amass. God's got to come down because you ain't getting but so high. God came down and said, now look at them fools. Look at what they're trying to do. It says, they are seeking, God said, to build a name for themselves. Why? Because they don't want to carry my name. God says, I have something for you to do. I've got a plan for you, Abraham. But in order for me to fill my plan, you got to leave here. In other words, stay with me. If you want to see where I want you to go, I'm not going to show you where I'm taking you till you leave where you are. You cannot stay here and have me. You cannot stay around paganism and have me. You cannot stay around humanism and have me. So you've got to leave, and you got to trust me that I know where I'm taking you, even though I'm not telling you. See, a lot of us are like this. Okay, God, show me where you're taking me, and then I'll let you know if I'm going. God says in 1 John 2 and John 15, he says, if you are friends with the world, you are an enemy of God. And he tells that to his disciples. If you hang out with the world, you can't have me. God has called every Christian to leave worldliness. He's not called us to leave the world. That is to not live in society, not work in society, not have responsibility in society. No, but worldliness is different. Worldliness are attitudes and actions that leave God out. You're worldly when there are attitudes and actions where God is dismissed from. God has saved us out of this world. The world is not, as we've said many times, a place. The world is a philosophy. It's like the world of finance, the world of fashion, the world of politics, the world of sports. While they involve places, they're really an orientation centered around a certain thing. World of finance is about money. Well, worldliness is about the exclusion of God. The enemy wants you to exclude God, and God says, leave there. That is, your life and my life cannot be defined by leaving God out or just putting him in piecemeal when we like it as a spare tire, taking him out the trunk when life goes flat, putting him back when we can roll on by ourselves again. You will never know where God is taking you unless you leave where you are, the world. You will never find out. He will never show you. What motivated him to leave? God said, I have an inheritance for you. Says he left to get his inheritance. An inheritance is like a will. It's something bequeathed to you. God has something for every believer here. If you are a Christian, he has a purpose that he wants you to fulfill. But he will not show you your destiny if he can't get you to leave the world. As long as you're hanging on to the world, you're at enmity against God. God cannot communicate with you. So you won't hear heaven talk. You won't get answered prayers. You won't get direction. You'll be aimless because your affections are not with him. They are elsewhere. You visit him on occasion, but you live with affections and actions that leave him out. In fact, one of the ways you know you're growing as a Christian is when your passion for the world is dying and your passion for him is growing. If you're loving the world more than him, that's because The world has your affections. It has your passions. It has grabbed you. So he says, you must leave this paganism that doesn't include me without me giving you all the details. You're going to have to walk by faith and believe I know where I'm taking you. The problem was, or is, that that's where he was born. That's where he grew up. That's where all his people are. That's where his businesses were. The Bible says he was a filthy rich guy. That's where all of his activities were. So it's hard to leave something you've grown up in, because that informs your frame of thinking. But it says when he heard the voice of God, he obeyed and left, because his inheritance was more important than his current location. So here's the decision we have to make. That is, if you really want to experience God, is what God has for you more important than where you are? Do you love the world so much you're willing to lose your destiny? Because God knows where he wants to take you, but you must be willing to leave, say goodbye. Because God knows where he wants to take you, but you must be willing to leave, say goodbye. Some of you are going to battle because you're going to have to say goodbye to that worldly relationship that's keeping you from your destiny. You may have to say goodbye to that worldly scenario where the guys are going out after work and they talking smut. You find yourself comfortable there and you don't want to lose a friendship. And we're not talking about being antisocial. We are talking about saying that does not fit where I'm trying to go. And so because that doesn't fit where I'm trying to go and I want to get to where God's taking me, I'm willing to leave. It's going to be hard to leave, but I'm willing to leave. Because you can keep yourself from ever hearing the voice of God if you stay in the world. That system that leaves God out. Hebrews 13:13 says, you must go outside of the camp where Jesus is. Jesus died outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was where Judaism was. He went outside the camp and died. It says, you can't stay in just a religious environment and not be willing to be identified with Jesus Christ and bear his reproach and expect to hear from God. You have to go outside the camp. That is, you can't be just part of the system. He based his life on a promise. Unless you leave the old, you will never discover what God has for you in the new. So the question is, what do you want? Do you want him, or you want to hang out where you are and not have him? Because he will never coalesce with the world. James 4. He won't do that. So the first thing you need to know is that your life of faith will require a leaving of worldliness, desires and actions that are in conflict with God. Secondly, your life of faith from the superstar of faith will involve a living. A leaving and then a living. Notice this, verse 9. By faith he lived, see that? By faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. Wow. He left and then he lived. Now watch this. It says he lived in the land of promise as a foreigner and an alien. Wait a minute now. Watch this now. He left Ur of the Chaldees, paganism. He is now in the land God is promising him. Okay, God promised him a land. But in the land that he's now in and living in, he's living as an alien and a foreigner in the middle of a promise. Some of us are in God's waiting room. And there's probably no greater discipline in the Christian life, no harder discipline than waiting. God, how long is this going to take? When you gonna come through for me? How come I take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back? How come every time I look like you're getting ready to do something, you flip on me and the thing doesn't work?